Yay Media Group.
There's so many foods popping up on shelves these days that they look amazing. The nutrition facts look really solid, and in some cases, too good to be true. They may also be tasting really good, and people are raving about them. But what is actually inside of them? Some of the ingredients can be complicated, to say the least. So this week, I am joined by food scientist Dr. Darryl Holliday. We're breaking down the surprising and sometimes strange ingredients that are making some of these products possible and what we need to know before tossing them into our carts. A quick note before we dive into today's podcast. If you like what you hear, I would love for you to subscribe to Fueled Wellness and Nutrition wherever you download your podcast. It would also be incredible if you take a minute to rate and review this podcast. Those things do matter and they really help us. I'm Molly Kimball. Welcome to Fueled, a wellness and nutrition podcast. I'm a registered dietitian and nutrition journalist with a passion to help people live their strongest, healthiest life possible. In my weekly TV segments and columns, there's a limited amount of time and space to cover everything, but there's so much more to share. This podcast is my opportunity to dive deeper into the topics you want to know about. Welcome to Fueled Wellness and Nutrition. I'm registered dietitian Molly Kimball. In this week's episode, we are talking about we're going to dive into food science. We're talking about foods that a lot of people are loving, certain products, certain brands that we're seeing on shelves, we're seeing online, they're maybe showing up on our social media. Things that are like there's a high protein bar, for example. It's the wildly popular David bar. There's low carb breads like Sola and others that are just really they're like 1 gram net carbs. There's these bakery items like croissants that look and taste just like a real croissant, but still like again 1 gram of carbs in there. So they're tasting good. They're really popular. The nutrition facts look like, what a lot of people are looking for. But when you do look a little bit closer, you see that these products have some ingredients that can be a little bit confusing as we're seeing it on the label. And really, as I've had questions from people about these specific products, the David bar, there's the Wio croissants, and people are asking me, what are these ingredients in them? And I took a closer look. I've been a dietitian for 26 years, y'all. I've done a lot of looking at labels. And some of these ingredients, I was like, I have no idea what this is. I had to look it up. It was not something that I had any level of familiarity with. So, if that's me, then I know that that's the same thing with y'all. And so that doesn't mean this is a bad thing, though. So I want to be really clear right off the bat. That doesn't mean that just because we're not familiar with this ingredient, it doesn't make this product bad. So I want to be very specific. This isn't about fear mongering or demonizing these ingredients or saying just because we can't pronounce it, we shouldn't eat it. There's a lot of ingredients that we see on labels that we may have a hard time pronouncing, but they're still really, really good for us. And then there's some that kind of get a bad rep, things like erythritol and allulose or natural plant-based sweeteners. And their counterparts, stevia and monk fruit, have these really great, cute sounding names. But, something like erythritol, that kind of can fall into that same category, and we're totally fine with it. So I want to say that right off the bat. This isn't about calling these things frankenfoods or saying that, like, oh, they're so popular, but here's why they're bad for us. This is more like they're so popular. They taste really good. The nutrition facts are looking good. But gosh, what the heck are these ingredients and sort of understanding it? So essentially, this episode is about awareness and learning and educating ourselves about this. And as I was thinking about it, because at first it can kind of take you aback and like, wow, what is this ingredient in here? But then I was thinking about it and I was thinking about so many clients that I've worked with over the years, so many conversations I've had with people. And, I think that some of these products can absolutely have a place depending on the person, depending on their goals, where they're coming from nutritionally, what their preferences are, their habits, what's going to set them up for success. So it's not about judgment. It's about learning what these ingredients are and saying, hey, educating ourselves. And then you may say, wow, that sounds really cool. I want to try that croissant. So to help us break it all down of what's really inside of these 3 foods specifically that we're going to be talking about, I am joined by food scientist Dr. Darryl Holliday. Uh, Dr. Holliday is someone who, anytime I've got something that stumps me, we've worked together on so many different projects, topics, anything that I bring to him that's a head scratcher, he's always there to help. He's down for it, down to join me with it. So with that, let's bring you in. Darryl, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. Super excited to be here again.
Oh my gosh, yes. So I don't know how long it's been. I mean, 10 years, 20 years that we've worked together on different couple collaborations and projects.
Probably something around this time, yeah.
I hit one of the first things that I remember was one of these what's going on with this is the alkaline waters.
Oh, yes, yes.
Yeah, and actually, I've got Evermore with us here. But we
Love it.
we were getting so many comments from people that were saying, "Hey, I think that the different types of alkaline waters that they were drinking weren't measuring up with the pH strips." And I was like, "Darryl, I think, what's going on with this?" And I learned from you that part of what makes alkaline water show up as alkaline doesn't register on a pH strip that a lot of people might have at home. You have to use an actual pH probe in the lab, and then these products actually turned out to be legit.
Yeah,
They
so
matched what they said on the label.
alkalinity is one of those weird things. Acidity can be too, that a lot of times there are things that act as acids or alkalines that the normal pH strips just aren't made to test for. And I think we're going to see some of that as we talk about some of these foods, that these are non-traditional food ingredients. I'll put it that way, but they have a place in nutrition regulation, in food stability. And so, as we dive in, I think we're going to learn that. I think you said it on the great. It's something to be aware of, to be knowledgeable, but not necessarily something to be feared.
There's so much emphasis, and I'm all for it, of real whole food, food as close to its origin as possible. And again, while that ultimately is a goal, it is something that when you look at what people are choosing, if someone is choosing a lot of foods that might be ultra processed and they're going to reach for that croissant, well, that croissant isn't necessarily that croissant's not really a real whole food anyway. It's also been refined and processed and all. So, yeah, so I think that these could have a place. Tell us your background, your expertise. You have just a full range of experiences and credentials. So share with our listeners.
Yeah, so I've got 25 plus years in the food industry. I started off in restaurants, in family dining and fine dining. Moved into quick service restaurants where I worked for Popeyes as an R&D chef on their menu development team. Found out about food science doing that, and really just took a hard detour into what food science is from a culinary perspective. Pursued a master's and PhD in food science. Spent 12 years in academia teaching students and working in extension supporting food entrepreneurs. And so always excited to be able to be back in a role where I can help educate consumers on what ingredients are, their importance, and how they can impact their food choices.
I think you had just started at Holy Cross when our paths first really crossed, and I don't know that I knew about the Popeyes experience. It's really cool.
Yeah.
Were you involved in the development of their blackened tenders?
No, that was not my time. But one of the things that we did was a lot of work on the kind of perfect timing right now was the launch of the Cajun turkey that's now available for Thanksgivings. So if you enjoy it, thank you. If you don't, I'm not the manufacturer.
The products we're gonna be talking about today, there's 3 that we're gonna talk about, and one is the David bar, and David bar is one that has been I'm gonna show it. The David bar has been, really it's relatively new to the market, but it has really risen quickly in popularity. A lot of people, when they're trying the David bar, they love the way it tastes. And we'll be talking about each of these in way more detail as we go. But one thing that's interesting about the David bar is it's really high protein, 28 grams of protein, and only 150 calories. A lot of times, a bar with this much protein would often have double the amount of calories or close to it. So that catches people's eye, it catches their interest. It's been one that they're reaching for. The other is these WIO croissants, and WIO. and these little butterflake croissants, and I thought, "There's no way these taste good." And I had all of these sent to both myself and to Darryl, and when I tasted it, is immediately I texted you and I said, "Holy smokes, this is a lot better than I thought it would be." And then the third product that we're talking about is Sola, the Sola bread. So, um, each of these kind of has some of the, ingredients that might raise eyebrows. What did you think of the texture and taste of each of these? Did you have any that you like specifically or any that you really didn't like?
So I will tell you, I was hesitant about the David bar. I've heard pros and cons on both sides of it, and I gotta admit, the one that I tried, the blueberry pie flavor, was a home run. That was delicious. I felt a little guilty because of it tasted like a candy bar, but then I felt really good that there was all that protein and low calorie. Um, Sola is I think if you're making sandwiches, a fantastic bread. I was slightly disappointed in the fact of how it toasted. It didn't toast up like traditional bread, but when making sandwiches with it, you couldn't tell the difference. And then the Wio croissants, I gotta say, I was terrified uh, before I tried them. I don't like them at room temperature, but slightly warmed in the microwave, the texture improves dramatically. So 15-30 seconds in the microwave, and they are soft, buttery, pretty impressive.
So I wanna go through, we'll work our way backwards on the Wio croissant. Why were you terrified? What part?
So when I first opened it, they were like rock hard. And
Yeah.
when you go to cut a croissant, you expect light and fluffy and flaky. And the outside was a little flaky, but it was a very dense croissant. And so I was like, okay, healthy croissant seems like a misnomer. But once you warm them up, I've done the air fryer, I've done the microwave. They like bounce back to life in an incredible way. And for being relatively healthy, they're worth eating.
And I'm holding it up if we use this part on any type of social. They're a big croissant. I mean, this is a big croissant, 53 calories and 1 gram of net carbs. So we'll come back to this because I want us to start with the David bar. But I was interested of what about the Wio croissant caused you pause. I just thought there's no way it's going to be good at all. Like 53 calories for that much bready, normally that
Buttery
might be a
goodness. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. The David bar. Do you want to share
Yeah.
what my text message was to you?
Yeah, let me pull it up. But it was something along the lines of like oily stool. And so don't eat it with other foods. So I was very cautious. I did
I
not
had
have
very specific instructions. I'm like, "Daryl, I need you to eat this David bar. Eat the whole thing without any other food around it." Because and the reason is if you're having the David bar with as, like, after a meal or with other food, it could kinda neutralize or buffer some of the effects that we're gonna be talking about. But so having it on as close to an empty stomach, so it's basically just hitting you straight, the ingredients in this David bar, and then pay attention to your poop.
yeah.
I texted you twice because this week I was like, "Don't forget." And you might
No,
wanna
I
stay close
appreciate
to
that.
home.
Yeah.
So so why what's the deal with David Barr? Do you wanna jump into it of what kinda
Yeah,
makes it a
absolutely.
little strange?
Yeah, so, I think one thing that David Bar does really well, if you look at their ingredients, they basically have broken all of their ingredients down into how they work in the bar. And so I think it's really great for educating the consumer. They've got a protein system, a fat system, and a flavor system. So if you see something you're not familiar with, you know what its purpose is there for. And so I think David hit a home run with trying to educate the consumer there. They could have done a little bit more on some of these um, nondescript terms. Um, but I think what really makes David Bar unique is the low calorie that you mentioned comparative to protein. And one of the reasons for that is if you've ever eaten a scoop of whey protein powder or plant protein powder, it's very chalky. And to counteract that, a lot of bars are adding fat as a lubricant to those protein systems. Well, what David has done is they've used a product called EPG. And what EPG is, it's an esterified plant glyceride. And so if you think of a triglyceride, we're going to go to science a little bit. You have a glyceride backbone with three fatty acids. And when you break those fatty acids and move them in their position in the bar or on the glyceride bone, so instead of going one, two, three, you may go one, three, two. And it's the same fatty acids that are there, but it allows you to change the properties of the fat. And so this is what companies have been doing since the discovery that trans fats were bad, the ban on trans fats. We've been esterifying fats to get the properties that we're looking for without a lot of the negative aspects of the trans fats. Well, what they've done with David is there a EPG has a specific profile that they modify, and in modifying it, it makes it harder for the body to digest them. So because it's harder for the body to digest them, you don't get the calories from them, and they have a tendency to come out as oily stool. Now, it's nowhere near as severe as what people saw with Olestra and the packages that say may cause anal leakage. So a little
I
bit
knew.
safer. We're making
I
progress.
I was telling our producer Garrett yesterday as we were talking about it. I was the name Olestra was escaping me, and I was like, "It's what was that drug?" And you're right, I forgot that it caused said
Yeah,
may
so people
cause
would eat
anal
a bag of
leakage.
chips because it said low fat, and the next thing you know, they couldn't get to the toilet in time. Um, Fortunately, we're well beyond that in today's food science. And so when we now have this fat, it acts like a fat. You get the flavor profile, the textural components of the fat, but you get a lot less calories from it because you're not able to fully digest it. And so it's kind of a win win across the board. Now, with any food ingredient, there may be people who are more sensitive. Um, I'm not necessarily one that probably follows a traditional dietitian diet like yourself. So I was probably less impacted than you were. I can't say I had those same results. Um, but it was good to be cautious the first time
Mhm.
trying it. Would I eat them again? Absolutely. Um, I would still, knowing what potential repercussions can come from it, will do so near home and not
Until
around
you're
other
comfortable
foods.
with it.
Yeah,
Right.
until I'm 100% sure. But,
Yeah.
there are people who are lactose intolerant. There are people who can't digest erythritol. There are people who are sensitive to monk fruit. So, um, is it a perfect magic silver bullet that no one's going to be affected by? No. But really looking at how does it affect the mass part of the consumers, I think it's a great system.
So to kind of sum it up, the EPG, which is esterified, is it propoxylated glycerol?
Yes,
Is the so EPG is what it's called. There's the I guess what you would consider like the trade name of it is Epigee, that it'll be referred to as kind of EPOGEE, and this is um what I think is kinda interesting is the backstory on this. Well, I'll come back to the backstory on it. So, this is the specific type of fat that is not digested and absorbed, and so that this is why
fully
when we're talking
digested.
right, okay, fully digested, and so the reason you have a bar that has 28 grams of protein and only 150 calories, usually that same bar with 28 protein would have 230, 240, 320 calories because it's almost impossible to have just a pure protein bar because it would otherwise, like you said, be chalky. Like there used to be, or there is still a website called U Bars, and you could make and you could say, I want a bar to meet these nutritional criteria and these types of ingredients. And years ago, I went in, yeah, it would be really fun for you to play around. That would have been a fun, like, student project. It was not inexpensive, though, but it was a fun thing to just kind of say, you could create, any type of product or, keep it entirely plant based or not, or any of that stuff. And so I put in my request for all these different ingredients that kept the protein really, really high, the fat moderate, and the carbs really low. And of course, it kind of gave me a flag of, are you sure you want to do this? Because the texture may not be just quite good. And I was like, I want to try it. And And I would eat it and it was chalky, it was dry, it was definitely a lot of protein in that because these nutrition bars need fats, they need different types of carbohydrates, and these are all gonna serve as the binder, the filler, giving that bulk. So when Daryl and I are talking about this David bar and that it's surprisingly low calorie, part of the reason it's surprisingly low calorie for all that protein is because the fat that's in there that gives that bulk, gives the mouthfeel, gives that texture, all the stuff, we're not absorbing all of it. And so when I tried it and just, you know, as we're talking about poop and everything else, we'll just say it. Like I have IBS, and so it's something that I do always kind of keep an eye on. But Daryl, I usually do have a relatively high fat intake, lots of olive oil. We may go through a liter of olive oil every other week. I mean, we go through a lot of olive oil, maybe even more, and avocado, all of that. So lots of fats and plant-based fats. But for me, this was next level. I was like, wow. And so I brought it to WGNO. The girl that I do the segments with there, Kerrigan, she had actually asked for this segment. So we're going to be doing a TV version of this because she had brought the product, the WIO croissants, to my attention. So I brought it to everybody at the station. And I'm like, y'all try this and see what you think. Tell me about your poop tomorrow. And so it was interesting because about half the people were kind of like you, like, maybe I noticed it a little bit. But especially if someone had an issue with constipation, they sort of welcomed the effects of the
Oh,
David
sure.
bar. And then there was a few people who had sort of an experience of me. So going back to Daryl's point, um, test it out, try it. And it might be something that you're like, you know what? Doesn't bother me at all, and I really like that high protein, low calorie bar. And like you said, you really love the way it tasted too.
I've had one. I've got another one that's sitting in front of me. I'll be trying that this evening. So if things change, I'll definitely keep you updated.
We'll we'll issue like a breaking news into our episode. Um, the other thing that I think is interesting about this Epigee is, and I'm going off of memory, I don't have the article in front of me that I pulled the detail of this from, but one of the guys who created the David bar also had been involved in the creation of the RX bar. And so I think it's interesting too, because the RX bar, it's very pure, natural, very simple ingredients. So simple, they put all their ingredients on the front of the label. And, he sort of shifted from the RX bar that was super successful, but more carbs, it has dates, et cetera, in it, to say, hey, how could we do this very low carb, high protein bar like David? And as they were looking and sourcing the different ingredients, kind of from that food science perspective, there is an ice cream called Nix, and it is produced overseas somewhere. I want to say like Norway or Finland or one of those, but
Hmm.
I'm again going off of memory on this. And Nix had this EPG, this esterified propoxylated glycerol, as the fat source in this ice cream. That was a way to have this low carb ice cream that still had a really nice texture, low carb, low calorie. And so the David Bar company, as a company, they acquired Epigee, the manufacturer of EPG. So that because as they were starting to make the David bars and they caught on popularity and people were like loving them, the limiting factor for them was getting enough of the ingredient, the EPG ingredient. So they acquired
Absolutely.
Epigee, the manufacturer for this EPG fat replacer. And so now I think there's a little bit of a stink of people saying they sort of cornered the market on this type of a specialized fat to go into other foods. I think Nick's maybe had to find another alternative for their ice cream. So some people are kind of complaining about that, but it's one of those things that people get up in arms about everything. So I think maybe upset that it came from their ice cream, and maybe seeing a little bit as unfair that they are really kind of controlling most of the production of this ingredient. So that's kind of a little juicy little side bit on the food science competition that's going on in the
Absolutely.
background on things. Yeah. Anything else we want to say about David bars?
I will say, like anything, flavor is dependent on different allergens. So if you do have allergens, please check the flavor to make sure that um, it's not going to have other issues related to it. But I would say that, you mentioned allulose, you mentioned erythritol earlier. We're seeing these sweeteners in we're seeing allulose in the David bar. Um, Allulose is also one of those sweetener systems that the FDA has stated your body doesn't absorbed in the same manner, so it's considered zero sugar, even though it ends in ose, which we classify it chemically as a sugar. So you get sweetness, you get a sugar, but it doesn't add to added sugar, but it does affect carbs. So I would say, the David Bar, I think, is a really good example of taking a lot of the different recent scientific food breakthroughs and kind of bringing them together. It's got a good shelf life, it's got a good flavor, it's got a good texture. Um, and then again, even though it is 150 calories, you want to make sure that now I'm going to throw on my slight dietitian hat. Calories are calories no matter where they came from, so don't overeat.
I'm looking at the label. I Pointing out what you had said too about they do a lot of education on the bar, like, they have protein system, and it's like their milk protein isolate, the collagen, the whey protein, the egg whites, the binding system, as they call it, so they're letting us know what all is kinda holding everything together in here, the fat system, and then it's sweetened, like you said, with, allulose, and then Garrett, our producer, as we were talking about it yesterday, he had said, "Doesn't the David bar have sucralose in it?" And I was like, "No, it's got allulose," and Garrett, you're right, it does have
It's in the
sucralose and
flavor system.
acesulfame
Yeah.
potassium. Yeah, and so, I'm a little surprised that they did go with the artificial sweetener sucralose and acesulfame potassium. Acesulfame potassium is what is in Coke Zero, and so, when there's so many other options for plant-based natural sweeteners, I'm a little surprised they opted for those.
I think with the bar market, and trying to get to a point, they've used a lot of high quality, more expensive ingredients other places. And when it comes to the sweetener system, because whether you're using stevia, monk fruit, sucralose, Ace K, um, the usage rate is so small that I think they made the decision from a cost perspective to be able to maintain a product that's affordability. Um, but also sometimes with with stevia and monk fruit, because they are natural, they're less stable than some of these other uh, high intensity sweeteners, and so you can get some potential chemical reactions through the processing or through storage, and it might have been what made the most sense in their system.
You're right, and so we're just hypothesizing, y'all, but, it would make sense if it was a function of cost, because using some of those plant-based natural sweeteners in addition to some of these other really kind of high technology ingredients they're choosing to use. And then also the stability, maybe just how it even works or the consistency of that type of ingredient. So David Bar, our takeaway for that is, it's all subjective. Some people hate any type of protein bar. Others, like Daryl, maybe you're going to be pleasantly surprised at the different flavors that you try. If you are sensitive to a plant-based sweetener like allulose, just know that that's in there, but really more than anything, it's going to be this EPG, this esterified fat replacer that is really what's keeping the calories low, and a largely non-absorbed fat that is what might cause that GI upset. And again, for some people, it's not at all. So kind of as it doesn't have any side effects at all. So with each of these three products we'll talk about, I think our answer is not going to be do we recommend it or not. I think with each of these products, it's going to be these have a place for some people at some times, and I think just kinda knowing about them and knowing a little bit of the pros and cons, but I think from just a sheer protein to calorie ratio, that David bar is really solid, and then the other ingredients in there, but if it's something that, if it's taken the place of another type of a protein bar that maybe also is artificially sweetened and, maybe has a little bit better nutritional profile in the David bar, I would say make the switch. Okay, next we'll move on to, our croissant. Okay. Had you ever heard of WeO before?
I had not until you brought them to my attention. But
It was new to me too.
they've got a full product line that's pretty impressive.
Yeah, they've got cookies, croissants, like, let's see, we kinda have, like, the whole list here. Cookies, chips, buns, muffins, pasta, pizza, croissants, donut holes, ice cream. I treated Daryl and I to the croissant because I like croissants and I wanted to try it and just say, they looked pretty, and so I was like, "Let's see how it really measures up." Plus, I figured a croissant is something that's doesn't have a whole lot else happening, and it would be a relatively easy to kind of just assess what the breadiness of this was without a whole lot of other distractions in it. So what do we the ingredient, if you can say the ingredient that is kind of there's a couple of strange ingredients here in the WIO products.
Yeah, so they're using a Wheat wheat flour. They have a smart and sweet system. They're using a WIO fat inhibitor and a WIO macro carbohydrate enzyme inhibitor. But I think what kind of stands out for me the most in all this is that if you look at the package, they don't use a nutrition facts panel. They use the 1993 regulation for the digestive facts. And the reason they're going with that is if we went with nutrition facts panel, it would be very different than digestive facts panel. And so the digestive facts panel states what are you actually absorbing as nutrients. And so these WIO specialized macro inhibitors, fat inhibitors are able to create a digestive facts panel that you said is crazy, like 53 calories for over 120-gram croissant. Um, and so we can kind of go through these piece by piece. Um, but I think really the kind of the key
Can I stop
factor,
you there? Because I think this
absolutely.
is when you said the digestive facts panel, it's one of those things that I had looked at this and I had not actually noticed the biggest letters on this package on the back label. Like sometimes like it's right there and it doesn't say nutrition facts like it usually says in big bold letters. But when you glance at something and you make the assumption that it's what we're used to it saying, it's digestive facts. So tell me, I've never seen a product use digestive facts labels before. And before you answer that question, I'll just share like with our listeners, as you look at it, there's kind of two panels side by side. The biggest one is digestive facts. And then to the left in smaller print, but kind of with a little box outline, nutrition facts without, and the word without is underlined, nutrition facts without the all natural carb and fat inhibiting fibers. So what it says is this is basically like if you were to look at it without, kind of like we were just talking about the David bar, those fats are not digested; they pass through undigested largely. The croissant is telling us here's what's digested, but if you were to take that out of it, 53 calories is what's in the digestive facts. Under the regular nutrition facts, without all those being accounted for, 519 calories. That's crazy.
Yeah, I
But
mean,
then our
it's a
body is only
significant
absorbing
difference.
yes, yes. And then 62 grams of carbs, whereas this has a digested the digestive facts is 5. So from 519 calories to 53 calories, from 27 grams of fat to 0 fat, and from 62 carbs to 5 carbs. Okay, so that's what's showing up the difference on these digestive facts. So tell me the history of this digestive facts label.
So in the early 90s, there was the late 80s, early 90s, for those that are like us, a little bit older, understand the fat free craze. And what happened was a lot of companies rushed into these fat mimetics or fat mimickers. And the whole idea was we want to create fats that act as fats, but um, don't provide the calories of fat. Ergo, we got into Olestra, and we've discussed that. But 20 years later, we're still seeing improvements in these areas. And it's less of an arms race and more of a we're going to do a lot of scientific due diligence. And so it's not, companies aren't as interested in being the first to market. They're really interested in being the best to market. And so we've seen a big gap in that delay. But during this time, a lot of companies pushed the FDA to allow changes in their labeling. And so in 1993, through Congress, the Code of Federal Regulations changed. The FDA approved what's called the digestibility a digestive facts panel instead of a nutrition facts panel. You don't see it a lot. I think we'll probably start to see it here and there a touch more. It was used by a fair number of people, 93 to about 96. Then the new labeling regulations came out in 96. And so a lot of companies just went back to the new labeling. But the fact that the digestive facts is still on the books and is allowed, it's really great to see, people using older regulations in a way that acts as education. And
You're
so
right. There's a lot of education. Yeah.
they could have just simply left the digestive facts, but they added the statement from the FDA on the back of the label. They added their nutrition facts so you can really see the difference. And I think that WIO as a whole could have done more education, but I think if you go to their website, a lot of it is there. It's not on the individual packaging, but they're not trying to hide anything, which I think is super important.
Yeah, agreed. And there's the QR code on the back that has the digestibility facts explained in 30 seconds. And so one of the two ingredients, and I'll flip to the space that so the two ingredients that are like it's a fat inhibitor and it's in a couple of different the exact terms for it vary depending on the product, but one is like a chiral hydrophilic polysaccharide plant extract. So break that down for us. Chiral hydrophilic polysaccharide plant extract, because that seems like what is in this croissant that I'm having, or what is in this cookie, or whatever else from WIO that I'm having. The second is a carb enzyme inhibitor. I'm gonna give it a go, but is it Cissus Velt grape extract? But CISSUSVELDT grape extract. And this is the what's referred to as the carb enzyme inhibitor. So break these down for us, what these are.
Yeah, so when we talk about a chiral molecule, we're talking about whether it's around a specific uh, in the molecule, a specific atom, and does it look mirror image? Does it not? Are there unique branches off this centerpiece of the molecule? And so, what we're looking at from the fat inhibitor is there are plants that have all sorts of crazy abilities that we don't fully know yet. And we're constantly learning more, doing more. And what they found in this system is a plant that actually lowers the the fat absorption. And so in this plant extract, it's basically acting as a fat mimetic. Your body is absorbing the fat and the plant extract at the same time. Your body says, "Oh, this isn't fat," and basically kicks them both out. And so, if you look at the digestive facts versus the nutrition facts, the total fat in the croissant should be 27 grams. But your total digested fat is zero because, again, your body's absorbing this, seeing that it's not what it thinks it is, and then kicking it out. Um, with the carbohydrate inhibitor, we're back to these plant extracts. In this case, we know that grapes have some amazing bioactives, depending upon the type of grape species. And this is what gives all of our different wines the really unique flavors and profiles. Well, this specific grape actually has a carbohydrate basically reducer. And so in the grape, it is designed to protect the grape plant during drought, during freezing, any of these where it needs to not release these carbohydrates to the environment and keep the plant alive. In this case, the body recognizes this plant extract, and same thing we take in the carbohydrate, we take in the plant extract, and the body doesn't absorb all of the carbohydrates. And so we're able to see some of this as um, it sees some of these carbs as a non-digestible fiber when in reality it's not. But because the body sees it as non-digestive, we don't take those nutrients from it.
Would this have potential for some people to also cause GI upset,
I think you're
like
probably
the
going to see
EPG?
more GI upset than you would with the EPG. Um, these are going to be there could probably be more people who are sensitive to this, and I think it will be product specific. Um, what makes these croissants unique is that they're high fat, high carb in their I'm going to call their natural environment.
Right.
With these additives, they're not, and
Yeah, it's
so
crazy. Right, the first ingredients, it says Weo wheat flour, but it's basically wheat flour. It's not whole wheat, it's just wheat flour, which is white flour. Second ingredient, European fermented butter, which is it's fancy fermented butter. And so, but the first and
absolutely,
two ingredients, white flour, basically it's wheat flour, but it's white. So white flour, I'm assuming the Weo is white wheat because
I
they
would
don't say
believe so.
whole wheat. So wheat flour doesn't specify whole wheat flour and butter, those being the first 2 ingredients. So like you said, it's a starchy, buttery product, and that's sort of the taste and flavor that you get, especially, like, when you heat it for just a bit that you said, it sort of opens up and it's big. It's like, I mean, it's a significant croissant. Like, this is a lot going on here for this croissant, and for it to go from 519 calories in this croissant itself to if I ate the whole croissant, I'm only absorbing 53. You'd
Yeah,
think something's gotta give in terms of maybe GI or other types of side effects it would have.
absolutely. And I think again, one, you may not see, do you eat the croissant on its own? Do you put a filling in it? All of these are going to play in how your body absorbs it. Um, I tried the croissant first on its own, and uh, had some intestinal discomfort, a little bit, not enough to not eat them again. I made a turkey and Swiss sandwich on the next one, and didn't have any issues. So adding that additional fat, that additional protein,
Yeah.
for me made a difference. It depends. I've not tried it with just like jam or in the morning or something like that, but it's going to affect everyone slightly different. Again, like we talked with the David bar, everyone is unique. Some people are more sensitive to different things. Also, the amount of them you eat. I'm not going to be one who's going to sit down and eat more than one croissant at a time.
They're
With
pretty
their cook,
dense, yeah.
and they are with
Yeah.
their cookies and other sweets, I'd probably have a larger portion. So again, it's maybe where you are sensitive to these compounds in one product versus another. And a lot of that is how your body absorbs these in different matrices. And so I think Weo has done a really good job of creating a variety of products, and you don't see each of their key components in all their products. They're added as needed, and I think that's really
Yeah.
smart on their behalf.
And like you said, the education that they give us. The David bars, I'm finding in stores, in-person stores, retailers like Vitamin Shop has bars like David. I have not seen the Weo products anywhere on shelves in real life, only online through, like, the Weo website, or Amazon has an array of their products.
Okay.
So just knowing that if you see it, or, different retailers, sometimes if it's a smaller retailer, you ask them to carry something, but I haven't seen it sold locally yet, so that's a only online thing. Completely new conversation for me on these ingredients, and also so interesting that the big label on here is digestive facts, digestive facts showing up as the really big image here, and then a little bit more education with the nutrition facts here, and then our QR code for more. So agreed. Sort of like that David bar. They're being real open about it. They're being very specific. They're teaching us a little bit about what goes into the fat matrix, what goes into the protein matrix, or what are these different ingredients used for. Which I think if you're going to use food science to create these types of foods with these types of kind of effects in them, and kind of altered nutrition facts, it just makes sense that you're also gonna provide that education around it, you know, to help people make sense of why the labels read as they do. So any last takeaways on WEO?
Yeah, the one thing I would say is the front of the label, without knowing all this information, can be a little misleading. If you look at the front, the top, it says low carb, fat free. They do give an explanation of the net carb calculator in the bottom, but like you said, the first ingredient is wheat flour. The second ingredient is European fermented butter. Um, Someone can
Right.
very easily not understand that it is not low carb or fat free in the grand scheme of things, but in a reality of the digestive facts. And in order to list digestive facts, you have to do a vast amount of research and demonstration of facts. So, on WIO's behalf, while it may appear a little misleading, the digestive facts, I'm going to say, without looking at any of their previous data that they have, um, the amount of evidence it goes through to support that, they've done their homework.
I was gonna ask that because it seems like would some of the carb enzyme inhibitor or the fat inhibitor, could they behave differently in different people? Like, could I be less sensitive to that fat inhibitor, that chiral hydrophilic polysaccharide plant extract? That fat inhibitor, if I'm less sensitive to it, would that mean that this would be a higher fat product is when I consume it? But it seems like you said, if they are going so far to put this on the label, they've hopefully have done a lot of studies, and it seems like across the board, people must respond relatively similar enough to be able to put this on the
Correct.
label? Okay.
Yeah, there may be one or two people in, I don't know, I don't want to give a number, but let's say 100,000 that might be more sensitive and might not have the same amount of fat reduction. But from a research perspective, they have to basically show without a doubt. And like any pharmaceutical, there's a vast amount of studies that go into it. There are always the people who may be allergic to it. You know, they can never say 100% that
Right.
no one's allergic to it. There's no side effects. Um, Same thing here. Not to that same level of scrutiny as a pharmaceutical, but there's still a whole lot of science and research that has to go in to validate these claims.
The third and the third of the 3 products that we'll talk about is Sola, and so this is the one I got the sweet and buttery. Is this the one did you get
I
similar?
actually got deliciously seeded
We look
because
like we're being paid by Sola. I got
they we're not being paid. However,
No, we're not
Sola,
being paid.
I can give you my address if you want to send me a check. Um, they were actually out of that one when I went to
Okay.
purchase. Um, so um,
Our slice of bread is a small slice compared to, a lot of breads, but there's some of my other favorite lower carb breads, are really tiny, and so, I mean, this
yeah,
is,
it's on the smaller low carb
mhm.
side. Yeah,
The I was the least excited to taste this bread. I thought that it was gonna be dry. I thought it was gonna be kind of, maybe like a little fibrous in texture. I really liked it. It has like a buttery sweetness, bready, everything going on with it. I was happy with it.
yeah, I'm was quite impressed. Some of the low carb or keto breads on the market, as you said, they're very dry.
Or become
Um,
gummy, like they as you chew them, they
Absolutely.
kind of are like you just the gums are becoming this weird gel almost in the bread, and I didn't
Yeah.
experience that with here.
Yeah, I agree. For me, I wanted to try it in a bunch of different applications. I toasted it, I microwaved it, I ate it as a sandwich, um, with almond and apple butter as a dessert last night. And
You're
so,
like, "Honey, it's my preparation for
absolutely,
this is
you know,
work. I
it's
must do this."
research, right? The things I go through to suffer. But overall, I was really impressed. Microwave, it held up like a normal piece of bread. It got a little soft and sticky in the microwave, but nothing that I wouldn't anticipate. Um,
The
some of
toaster you
the
didn't love.
I didn't love the toaster. It didn't toast evenly. And so I think that would be my biggest complaint from the user standpoint. Um, and it's not that it doesn't toast because it does get crispy, but it looks very variegated almost in that it's not an even toast. It's very spotty. Um, but it gets crispy on the outside, stays light and fluffy on the inside when toasting. Um, but a visual perspective, you'd have a hard time selling this in a diner as like a piece of buttered toast on the side
Right.
of like your um, plate breakfast. Um, Overall, though, really what we see here is a whole lot of resistant starch.
Yeah, tell me about this because the key ingredient is listed, the first ingredient after water is resistant wheat starch. And this is in not just the Sola products, but a lot of pastas and all are centered on resistant starches. And I feel like I'm always a little suspect of these. So, what are your thoughts? I am. I'm like, but how much are we not digesting it? How resistant is the starch really to being digested? It almost seems like in that category I find of like too good to be true, which I guess is kind of like all of these foods feel a little that way.
Sure. So resistant starch falls into there's a big category of resistant starches, and there's four types. We won't go into all the science of them, but basically, we're going to look at two main types. One is where you take a starch, whether it's potatoes, rice, pasta, you cook them, you put them in the fridge, and then what happens is the starch goes through a process called retrogradation. And what this is basically the starch changes shape after it cooks and cools. Um, the whole idea is that the starch squeezes out water and basically relocks in shape and is resistant to digestion. Thus, we get resistant starch. So those that make gumbo, when you take gumbo roux, you freeze it, you get that layer on the surface when you thaw the gumbo. That is some of the starch in the roux um, retrograding and releasing the water. And then it's very hard to get all that reincorporated. So with resistant starch, there's that kind of more natural version. The other side is we can take wheat starch and we can chemically modify it to be chemically modified resistant starch. This basically allows us to use that starch in a food product where it's already gone through the retrogradation process. And so we don't see a textural change post processing. Is resistant starch 100% resistant? No, it's still starch. We're still going to absorb some of it. Um, but it's not going to be in that same manner where you're going to see as high of insulin spikes, where potentially going to feel um, increased satiation, so you'll feel full a little bit longer. I was able to support a study at LSU during my PhD where they were looking at resistant starch, and resistant starch, I'm gonna tell you, is a lot like trying to eat a scoop of whey protein. It's like trying to eat cornstarch, basically. Like, it's cakey,
Right.
it's not very good.
Right.
Um,
Which is sort of what I thought this bread was gonna be, and I'm was really pleasantly surprised. Yeah.
yeah, and so they found ways and balanced usage rates now. When resistant starch was really first becoming super popular, the study we were doing, we were trying to feed an obnoxious amount of resistant starch to people, and come to find out the people didn't like it because it wasn't very good. So we found this way to basically make I'm going to call it a nutrition bar mindset, where we basically, instead of protein in a nutrition bar, we loaded the nutrition bar with resistant starch. Um, Same thing. You're introducing a whole lot of fiber that your body's not used to. You're going to get intestinal discomfort. They ended up having to exclude some people because they were just extremely sensitive to it. Um, in a modern regular setting, you're not going to necessarily feel as much of that intestinal discomfort. You're getting a realistic dose, not a obnoxious research dose in the Sola product. You're getting a bread that, for the most part, tastes like bread, looks like bread. And again, we talked about it's a little bit smaller. Part of that is maintaining the calories per serving. Part of that is you're not going to get the same lift and rise like you would with a slice of bunny bread. Um, but does it meet the needs of people looking for a lower calorie um, option? Absolutely.
When you look at the ingredients here, that's it's the resistant wheat starch followed by wheat gluten, which is gonna boost the protein there, and then wheat protein isolate, inulin, which is another fiber, olive pomace oil, which is kind of a lower quality, por part of the olive oil, and then all types of other fibers, so citrus fiber, flaxseed fiber, vegetable fiber, pea fibers, just all so I would look at this and kind of going back to that original conversation we had of, looking at foods that are as whole as possible, as close to their natural state as possible. This is not that.
Correct.
That fiber that's almost that cornstarchy fiber that Daryl's talking about, that's really the first ingredient here, and then it's got all these other products that are sort of smoothing it out, boosting the fiber, and when you look at the label, it has 9 grams total carbs, 8 of that's fiber. When you subtract your fiber from that, it gives you 1 gram net carbs. So this slice of bread being just 40 calories and 1 gram net carb, again, and the protein being 4 grams for just a slice, it's one of those things of for the person who's the purist and is loves, the, traditional sourdough bread or the very traditional, that's if that is the focus and that's the priority, this product or these croissants we're talking about aren't gonna be a fit for that. For the person, though, who is looking for ways to keep their carbs in check, still have the foods that they enjoy, and something like, most people who are trying to live, and make nutritious choices on the daily, they're not eating croissants regularly anyway. They're not if you're
Right.
trying to be healthy, you're not eating croissants daily. And so something like this may be a way that if you have sort of shifted and you are, making these healthier choices, maybe but there's a reason or a desire that you wanna keep your carbs in check. It might be a necessity or it might be a preference. But maybe something like that Wio croissant is what you have with that Saturday morning, and that's sort of like that once a week treat, just like instead of that regular croissant, or you may say, "You know what? I took a look at all these and none of these are for me. I don't want any of these ingredients." But this is really just for us to start to see that it's really where I think food science is really coming to the spotlight in foods, and that can scare people a lot, and it can make something feel like it's a fake or fabricated food. And I would say my takeaway on all of these is nutritionally, when we look at the macronutrient profile, the protein, the fiber, the calories, what that takeaway is and what our body is absorbing of these, is actually pretty good. If we're looking for the purists, these foods are not going to be for them. And, it's really gonna come down to that individual preference of if it's something that is gonna work in your lifestyle or it's gonna take the place of something, it might be a better choice than something else you're choosing now, then it might be something to consider.
Absolutely. And I think the one other thing to add to that is we see this huge push for protein in everything. If you take peas, oats, citrus, all these things, and citrus doesn't fall into the protein category, but it fits in the conversation. So peas, oats. Once we've pulled those proteins out, you're left with all this fiber. So this is an industry way of
Yeah,
taking a waste product and it still being a good food product and putting it back into a system that can benefit. So bread is a great place to put fiber. That's why we see whole wheat with the bran being added back to the bread to get that whole wheat. With citrus fiber, we have all this citrus fiber left after juicing. Orange juice is great, but what do you do with all that leftover fiber? Well,
right.
here's a way you can use it. And these fibers are great in uh, products to help hold moisture And so, one, they give you fiber, which everyone needs more of. And two, they make the product more edible. So it's not only there as a nutritional push, but it's there as a functional factor as well, and
And I think
sustainability.
kind of one final takeaway nutritionally on these is I think a lot of times we're reaching for these products. We see it on the shelf. Ooh, solar bread, that's a low carb product. I see it at everything from your local grocer to Whole Foods or the David bar. They're right at the front counter as you walk into the vitamin shop. We're getting them, we turn them over. Ooh, 40 calories and only one net carbs, or 150 calories, 28 protein. I'm going to have it. We're not even looking any further. So this is to say, hey, let's pause for a second, let's see what's really in these, and then educate ourselves about it, learn about it. To me, it's just fascinating too that these very kind of just really kind of bizarre ingredients, and they're really they've been it's fascinating that these ingredients have been, number 1, developed and then found their way into these foods, and that food makers are finding a way to take these foods that we love, make them still palatable, yet fit that nutritional profile. So, takeaway is if you see something that seems too good to be true, you're like, "Wait, that doesn't make sense that this is only 53 calories." It probably actually isn't. And so doing a little bit deeper dive and then seeing, from there, what choices do you wanna make? Any last things that you would add in, Daryl, before we wrap up?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're going to see, as you said, you're going to see new products. You may question them. Is every company doing their due diligence? Probably not. I don't want to say that there's no unscrupulous people in the food industry. However, if you're going to larger brands that are using things that are endorsed by the FDA, reach out to these companies, ask for clarification. Um, in my personal opinion, a marketing director's first role is education. It doesn't matter what the product is. And if they're making something like WIA, where it really requires that education, or even as something as simple as what is resistant starch, we should see Sola using that as a platform. You're
Right.
always going to have people who are going to be on social media giving negative feedback. So, um, don't take everything positive or negative you see online as about food as 100% true. It may be where it was bad for this one person, um, but it might not be bad for you. I think the EPG was like you said, was had a much greater impact on you than it did on me. So proceed with caution, proceed with care. Um, but at the end of the day, nutrition and taste matter.
I really appreciate your time. I'm so happy to just have this conversation with you. It's been way too long since we've caught up and kind of like chatted through products and gone through. I love your food science brain, and it just like the depth and the level of expertise you have in so many different aspects of food science. I love it. I think if there's things that you see in the future and you're like, "Hey, Molly, let's do another one of these on these kind of weird ingredients," let me know. For our listeners, I
Absolutely.
would say the same thing. And then Daryl, just anything that is that you run across that you're like, "This would be a cool topic." Like, run it by me. Let's get you back on. It's been way too long. I'm gonna link to our other podcast that we've done on sweeteners though, the plant-based sweeteners. I think you and I did one on plant-based sweeteners right when allulose was coming out, I believe. And
Yeah.
so I'll link to that one because it's still relevant. The things that we talked about there are still relevant. So always a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me.
A tremendous thank you to Darryl Holliday for joining us. Always a blast spending time with him, learning from him, getting his take on it. If you try these products, we want to hear what you think. We want to hear if you had any of the things that we talked about, any weird side effects, or if you're like, heck no, I don't want to touch any of this. If it's kind of, it's just, it seems too different, too unusual. And I get that too. For me personally, I think these are things that would not be part of my normal repertoire. But I do think, again, they can have a fit for people who have nutritional needs, preferences, and as we said earlier, maybe they kind of fill that emotional gap at times for people. If there's other products that you're seeing that you're like, hey, what's the deal with this? Reach out, let me know, share this product with me. There's so many things that some of these that we talked about today, I'd been seeing on shelves. Some, other people brought it to me and said, what's the deal with this ingredient? So always reach out if there's stuff that you want us to dig in on your behalf. I'm registered dietitian Molly Kimball, and you've been listening to Fueled Wellness and Nutrition, the podcast. If you'd like more Fueled Wellness and Nutrition, please head over to mollykimball.com, and you can follow me, Molly Kimball RD, on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. If you haven't yet, please go to Apple Podcasts or wherever you download your podcast and subscribe, rate, and review this podcast. Join us next time for another dose of Fueled Wellness and Nutrition. Thanks for listening, and stay focused on living your strongest, healthiest life.